Earlier. Well, right now we're joined by the human rights lawyer Mark Guthrie for his take on the terrible scenes we saw unfold here on Sky News yesterday. Mr. Guthrie, perhaps you can talk to me about what James Heapy was saying there. He was convinced that what we witnessed unfold at that maternity hospital in Mariupol was a war crime. He then went on to talk about evidence. What's your take on what we saw unfold?
Well, the minister is broadly right. I mean, he's set it out in very clear terms. I suppose as a lawyer, I would say is that which war crimes anybody would be charged with is going to depend on the evidence. But broadly speaking, he's right. And he's right to say that liability for war crimes runs from top to bottom. It's it certainly is more difficult to prosecute those at the top than those at the bottom, but those who wage war are accountable under the law.
Let's go back to the beginning. What are war crimes? From what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, can you give us some examples of what Western countries, overwhelmingly a number of Western countries have gone to the International Criminal Court and said we are witnessing war crimes? What specifically are they talking about?
OK, there are three broad categories of war-related crimes. At the very top, you've got genocide, and President Zelensky described what happened to the children's hospital in Mariupol yesterday as genocide. That's going to depend on the evidence, because to prove genocide, you've got to prove that there is a concerted effort to wipe out a national group. Then you've got crimes against humanity, and that's a systematic attack, a systematic, for example, murder of people, and that those who perpetrate crimes against humanity have got to know about that attack. And then you've got grave breaches of the Geneva Convention of 1949, breaches of international humanitarian law, and those would be attacks on civilians, attacks on civilian objects. So the attack on the hospital, there's a strong case to answer that is a war crime, a breach of the Geneva Conventions, which protect civilians in the time of war.
Talk to me about how evidence is gathered. We're looking at video here of what happened at that hospital in Mariupol. But what would the International Criminal Court, for example, be looking at? How is a case put together?
Well, as the prosecutor at the ICC is seeing to doing, he's sending a team of investigators. So you're looking at obviously what's happened on the ground. You'll be looking at video evidence. And then ultimately, you'd also be relying upon the evidence of military analysts, such as the Air Commodore you had on previously, looking at analysing all that. And that's particularly important for offences such as genocide and crimes against humanity, because you're looking at murder on a widespread scale as part of an overall plan. Probably grave breaches of the Geneva Convention are war crimes which are most straightforward to prove. But it's a case of putting the pieces together, as in any other crime, crime. It's gathering all the pieces of evidence together.
You mentioned before that those who can be liable for war crimes go from the bottom to the top. So we're talking about foot soldiers, general, all the way up to Vladimir Putin himself. And I was wondering if you could explain something to me that has been talked about this week. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer's brought it up, the MP Tom Tugendhat, and the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss talked about it. And this is the crime of aggression, under which political leaders and military chiefs can be held individually responsible for an invasion. That is being talked about as being levelled at Vladimir Putin. But there is a difficulty in holding him to account for that. Can you explain it to us?
Well, they're looking at the nature of the aggression, or nature of the war which Russia has unleashed against Ukraine. But even if you were trying Vladimir Putin for crimes at the International Criminal Court, for war crimes, you're going to have, there is a problem in that, of course, he's in Russia and he's not going to voluntarily surrender. So getting him to stand trial is going to be very, very difficult. And you and your viewers remember that, you know, the war crimes prosecutions in Bosnia-Herzegovina and how long it took to get Radovan Karadzic, the leader of the Republika Srpska in Bosnia-Herzegovina and the leader of the Bosnian Serbs, to get him to stand trial. Obviously, he went underground. It's not going to be easy to put anybody at the top level on trial, maybe easier at the bottom level. But the other thing to remember is that this is not going to happen soon. It's going to be, you know, if there is any prosecution, unfortunately, it's going to be a long time in the future.
Mark Guthrie, human rights lawyer, we really appreciate you talking us through all of that. Thank you for your time this afternoon here on Sky News.
Thank you.